When you install Plant 3D, the out-of-the-box specs and catalogs are located by default on your C drive. So let's take a look to see where all these files reside. So we're going to navigate to our C drive. And under our AutoCAD Plant 3D 2018 content folder, this is what the content looks like right here. So we have a number of different catalogs that you can see different pipe specs. We have wastewater, we have DIN. The one that we typically would be using is going to be the CPAC ASME. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. And what you see here is where all the specs and catalogs reside. So you can tell a spec by looking at the file extension here. So for every spec, we have two files. We have a PSPX extension and a PSPC extension. So when we do any work with specs, if we move any of these spec files, we have to move both together. If we move one without the other, the spec won't work. So always remember these work in pairs. The catalog files have the extension PCAT, and these work individually. There's only one component to each of these. Another thing you have to understand is you can't rename a spec file. If you want to change this to a custom spec name, you can't just go in and use the right click and rename. The spec won't work. There's a lot of moving parts inside these files, and they have to be pathed correctly. So what you want to do is actually open that CS150 spec. Once you have it opened, save as to the new name, and that'll make sure that all the links get copied over and updated. So also in this folder, just to take a look and see, we have what we call the CPAC Common. There's a couple of things we have to look at in here. One of the ones that we have that's important is our placeholder. We have an imperial and a metric catalog. These catalogs contain just sort of generic parametric shapes. So if, for example, you have a specific valve that you want to place in a pipe run and you don't have a custom component for that, you can't find the right shape. You don't have to wait until your administrator can create that shape for you. We can use a custom placeholder, which actually is just a parametric shape that assumes the correct dimensions so that you do have something that you can place in your pipe and you can keep working. So the placeholder catalogs are important. We have a number of different catalogs. We have a nozzle catalog for when we're working with equipment. And we also have pipe support catalogs. Now, these don't work the same way as the pipe catalogs. These ones we shouldn't be editing. And just so you understand the difference, the nozzle catalog has an ACAT extension. And it's because it's part of the equipment. It's not really part of the piping. And we also have instrumentation specs as well. So again, these are ones that we can modify, but we're not going to look at these in this course. We're just going to stick with the piping. So we can actually change the location of where some of this content is stored. So typically, when you work with a project, specs are specific to a project or client. So we can store the specs inside the project environment, but typically we keep the catalog components in a shared location because there could be multiple projects using the same catalog information, whereas the specs are project client specific. So once we start working with this, we can actually remap our project to have a specific catalog location, which may in fact be different from our spec location. But we'll deal with that in a later chapter. So when you're working with the specs and catalogs on a local drive, it's fine for single user, but as soon as you move into a multi-user project environment, the specs and catalogs should reside in a common location, somewhere in a network drive. It's also recommended that you restrict access to just a few well-trained people to make sure that your specs and catalogs are always up to date and that every user has the most current information.